So in the year 1014, a Byzantine emperor captured an alleged 15,000 enemy soldiers.
Which is just a massive number for the time.
Right. Absolutely massive. And instead of executing them or, holding them for ransom like you'd expect, he chose a punishment that still echoes as just one of the most brutal acts in medieval history.
Yeah, it's genuinely chilling.
He divided the men into groups of 100. Then he completely blinded 99 out of every group. And for that 100th man, he gouged out just one eye, basically leaving him with just enough sight to guide the rest of his comrades home.
I mean, the sheer psychological terror of that, the sources say it supposedly killed the rival monarch on the spot when he saw them return.
Literally dropped dead. But the true shocker here, and the reason we're digging into this, isn't just the cruelty. It's the fact that this very sane, ruthless emperor, after finally winning the war, turns around and gives the conquered nation a massive tax break.
Yeah, he protects their local culture, and he actually keeps their religious institutions completely intact.
It makes no sense at first glance. Welcome to today's deep dive. We've got a massive stack of historical texts, academic papers, and chronicles detailing the Byzantine-Bulgarian wars of the 10th and 11th centuries.
And our goal today is simple. We really just want to focus purely on the events.
Exactly. We are extracting the hard facts about how the mighty First Bulgarian Empire was ultimately brought to its knees. The title of today's deep dive is Conquering Bulgaria. And we're looking at this as a sort of masterclass in geopolitics.
Right, because we're essentially contrasting two fundamentally different Byzantine emperors who both tried to absorb Bulgaria.
It's like night and day.
Totally.
Yeah.
First, you have John I Tzimiskes, who used this fast, aggressive military blitz. He wanted total erasure. And then decades later, we have Basil II, the guy who gets the terrifying nickname, the Bulgar Slayer.
The eye-gouging guy.
That's the one. He spends decades using a grinding mix of military attrition, psychological warfare, and then, surprisingly, integration.
And if you're listening to this and wondering, why medieval Balkan history matters to you, consider this a timeless case study. It really illustrates the profound difference between just defeating an enemy on the battlefield versus actually integrating a conquered state so it doesn't immediately rebel the second your back is turned.
Because that's exactly what happens. To understand how Bulgaria falls, we really need to look at the geopolitical chessboard in the late 10th century.
Right. Set the stage for us.
So the Byzantine Empire, which is based in Constantinople, is getting incredibly frustrated with their northern neighbors, the Bulgarians. And the primary source of that frustration stems from the Magyars.
Ah, the Magyars. These are the nomadic equestrian ancestors of the modern Hungarians, right?
Exactly. During the reign of the Bulgarian Tsar Peter I, these Magyars were constantly riding down from the Carpathian Basin. They were crossing straight through Bulgarian territory and just launching these devastating raids into the Byzantine Empire.
Which obviously makes the Byzantines furious.
Oh, they were livid. The Byzantine court in Constantinople basically accuses the Bulgarians of intentionally leaving the back door open.
Which, to be fair, is a completely valid accusation, considering the Bulgarians simply didn't have the military strength to stop the Magyars anyway.
Right, they couldn't fight them if they tried.
I mean, they basically signed a treaty with the raiders that essentially said, feel free to walk across our lawn as long as you're only going to throw rocks at the neighbor's house.
That is pretty much exactly what happened. And the Byzantines had actually been paying Bulgaria an annual tribute specifically to prevent this kind of thing. But by 967, the Byzantine emperor, Nicephorus II Phocas, he decides to cut off the cash.
He's just done paying.
Done. He refuses to pay the tribute. But Nicephorus has a major problem. The bulk of his military is totally bogged down fighting massive campaigns in the east against the Arabs.
So he literally doesn't have the manpower to march up into the Balkans.
Exactly. So what does he do? He decides to outsource his Bulgarian problem. He sends an ambassador with a massive sum of gold all the way up to the Kievan Rusas.
Ah, the Kievan Rusas. The really formidable federation of Slavic and Norse peoples in what is now Ukraine and Russia.
Yep. Nicephorus basically hires their prince, a guy named Sviatoslav, to invade Bulgaria from the north. It's the classic move of hiring a mercenary to do your dirty work.
But outsourcing your foreign policy to a warlord rarely goes according to plan.
No, it totally spirals into a geopolitical nightmare for Byzantium. Because Sviatoslav doesn't just launch a quick, punitive raid, he invades with a massive force.
He's there to stay.
Exactly. He crushes the Bulgarian army, captures over 80 towns along the Danube, and eventually takes the Bulgarian Tsar, Boris II, hostage.
Wow.
Yeah, Sviatoslav looks at the rich, fertile lands of the Balkans, realizes he controls the critical trade routes of the Danube River, and decides he has absolutely no intention of taking his Byzantine gold and going back to Kiev.
So the Byzantines accidentally replaced a manageable, weakened neighbor with a terrifying expansionist superpower.
A superpower practically within marching distance of Constantinople.
That is a massive backbone.
Yeah.
And this forces a regime change back in Constantinople, right?
Right.
Enter John I Themistokes.
Right. Themistokes overthrows Nikephoros and realizes he has to clean up this monumental mess, and he wastes no time. In 971, he launches a lightning-fast counteroffensive.
A real blitzkrieg.
Yeah, he marches his armies north over the Balkan Mountains, completely catches the Russes by surprise, and defeats them in open battle.
He's moving fast.
Very fast. He captures the Bulgarian capital of Preslav and eventually pushes Sviatoslav all the way back to a fortress on the Danube called Dorostilon. And after a grueling siege, Sviatoslav is forced to surrender and abandon the Balkans entirely.
Okay, so Themistokes wins the military victory. The Russes are gone, and he now controls the eastern half of the Bulgarian Empire, including the capital.
This is where we see his specific philosophy of conquest. Themistokes goes for total assimilation. He decides the first Bulgarian Empire simply, no longer exists.
Erased from the map.
Literally, he wants to make a permanent ideological statement. Themistokes brings the captive Bulgarian Tsar, Boris II, back to Constantinople for a massive Roman triumph.
Oh, standard Roman power move.
Completely. In the middle of the imperial city, in front of the roaring crowds, he publicly strips Boris of his imperial insignia. Most notably, he forces him to take off his golden crown and his red boots.
Now, we have to mention those red boots because they were incredibly significant, right?
Oh, absolutely.
In the Byzantine world, the dye used for that specific imperial purple red was strictly controlled. Like, only an emperor of equal standing was allowed to wear them.
Right.
So taking the boots wasn't just, a wardrobe change. It was the legal demotion of an entire civilization.
That's a great way to put it. Boris is then handed a standard Byzantine court title, magistros, which effectively makes him just another pensioner of the state.
Just a retired guy on a stipend.
Pretty much. Themistokes then systematically dismantles the Bulgarian identity. He renames their capital city from Preslav to Ioannoupolis, basically naming it after himself, John.
Wow, the ego.
Right. He abolishes the independent Bulgarian Patriarchate, folding their church under Constantinople's control. He refuses to recognize any distinct local customs, and he just imposes standard Byzantine taxation without a second thought.
Now, I have to challenge the idea that Themistokes was a brilliant strategist here. I mean, tactically, sure, he won the battles. But strategically,
Yeah.
his post-war plan is a complete disaster. It's exactly like executing a hostile takeover of a rival company, firing the CEO in front of all the employees, dissolving the brand, and then canceling everyone's local holiday schedule.
Right.
You might own the building, but you've guaranteed that every single employee is going to actively sabotage you the second you leave the room.
Oh, your critique is entirely validated by the historical events that immediately follow, because Themistokes' blitzkrieg only conquered the eastern half of Bulgaria.
Right, the western half was still out there.
Exactly. Up in the rugged mountains of Macedonia and what is today Albania, that area remained untouched by Byzantine troops. And then, in 976, John I Themistokes suddenly dies.
Which creates a massive power vacuum in Constantinople.
Huge one. The Byzantine Empire is suddenly plunged into this brutal, multi-year civil war. Powerful generals in the east, like this guy Bardas Skleros, rise up in rebellion against the central government.
So all of Byzantium's military might is pulled east to fight itself.
Yep. And that unconquered western half of Bulgaria sees its opportunity and absolutely erupts in rebellion.
And this rebellion introduces us to four brothers known as the Comitopiolae David, Moses, Aaron, and Samuel.
Though, through a series of battlefield deaths and some pretty ruthless internal purges, Samuel eventually takes sole control.
And Samuel is fascinating because he operates almost like the founder of a guerrilla startup, taking advantage of a bloated, distracted monopoly.
That's a perfect analogy. Samuel realizes he cannot defend the old occupied capital in the east, so he completely shifts the demographic and economic center of the Bulgarian state southward.
Down into the mountains.
Right, into the mountains of Macedonia, centering his power around the really easily defensible lakes of Prespa and Ohrid.
Oh, smart.
Very smart. He builds fortresses, establishes new trade networks, and even creates a brand new autocephalous or independent church to provide spiritual legitimacy to his emerging state.
But Samuel still has a major legitimacy problem, doesn't he?
He does.
He's a brilliant commander, sure, but he's isn't of royal blood. And in the medieval mindset, you can't just declare yourself Tsar out of nowhere. The people need a connection to the old dynasty.
And he miraculously manages to find that connection in a man named Prince Roman.
Right. Now, Roman is the younger brother of the deposed Tsar Boris II.
Yes. And when the Byzantines captured both brothers years earlier, they recognized that Roman was a threat to the bloodline, so they castrated him.
Because mutilation was a classic Byzantine political tool.
Ex-
A eunuch legally could not sit on the imperial throne, so it was this loophole way of ending a royal dynasty without actually committing the sin of murder.
Right. Very pragmatic cruelty. But Roman actually manages to escape his Byzantine captivity and flees back to Bulgarian territory, where he links up with Samuel.
Oh, wow. So what does Samuel do?
Well, because of his mutilation, Roman cannot technically be the Tsar, but Samuel embraces him anyway. He treats him with full royal honors, and he basically uses Roman's presence to give his guerrilla movement undeniable traditional legitimacy in the eyes of the Bulgarian populace.
So Samuel becomes the de facto ruler, the military commander on the ground, but operating under the theoretical sovereignty of this last royal heir.
Exactly. It's a brilliant political
It
maneuver.
really sounds like Samuel is masterfully building a cohesive state here. But the sources point out a major internal cancer eating away at his efforts, right?
Yeah.
The Bogomil heresy.
Ah, yes. The Bogomils. This was a massive grassroots religious movement spreading rapidly through the Balkans.
What do they believe?
They were dualists. They believed that the spiritual world was created by God, but the physical, material world was actually created by Satan.
That is a heavy theology.
It is. And because the physical world was inherently evil to them, they rejected official church organization, the wealth of the elite, the authority of the state, and even the cross itself.
I mean, think about the timing of this.
Yeah.
Samuel is desperately trying to centralize power. He needs men to fight in his armies, and he needs farmers to pay taxes to fund the war.
Right.
Meanwhile, this widespread religious sect is running around telling the common people that the king, the wealthy priests, and the state's wars are all the literal work of the devil.
Yeah, it must have absolutely devastated his ability to recruit troops and collect revenue.
It really fractured the social cohesion of the state just when they needed absolute unity.
Because state building requires resources and compliance, and the Bogomils were preaching a pacifist, anti-establishment lifestyle that actively undermined both.
Despite this massive internal handicap, though, Samuel is incredibly successful militarily, isn't he?
Oh, completely. He takes full advantage of the Byzantine Civil War, launching devastating raids deep into imperial territory. He's burning lands as far south as the Peloponnese and Greece.
Which brings us back to the Byzantines and the new emperor, Basil II.
Right, so Basil spends his first 10 years on the throne, literally fighting for his life against his own generals in the east.
Because to the court in Constantinople, the East was the wealthy, cosmopolitan heartland. Right? The Balkans were just seen as this rugged periphery.
Exactly. Basil simply couldn't deal with Samuel until his own civil war was totally crushed. But by 986, Basil finally secures his throne and turns his attention west.
Time to deal with the Bulgarian problem.
Yeah. He gathers a massive army and marches on the Bulgarian city of Serdica, which is modern-day Sofia. But Basil is relatively inexperienced as a field commander at this point.
It doesn't go well.
It goes terribly. The siege drags on, his army runs dangerously low on supplies, and paranoia starts setting in about a potential mutiny among his officers. So he orders a retreat back toward Byzantine territory.
And Samuel's waiting for him in the mountains.
He is. Samuel ambushes the retreating Byzantine column in this narrow, treacherous mountain pass known as the Gates of Trajan.
I bet that was brutal.
It was an absolute slaughter. The Byzantine army is strung out and disorganized, the imperial forces are annihilated, and Basil II barely escapes with his life.
Wait, didn't he have to leave everything behind?
Everything. He is forced to abandon his imperial tent, the treasury, and all the insignia of his office right there on the battlefield.
That has to be a catastrophic humiliation for a Roman emperor.
Unbelievable humiliation. But this defeat actually acts as the ultimate wake-up call.
How so?
Basil realizes the quick, aggressive strategy Tsimiskas used just isn't going to work here. Samuel's Bulgaria isn't a centralized state with a single capital you can just capture.
Right, it's totally decentralized.
Every local Bulgarian magnate, every provincial governor is basically ruling their mountain fortress almost independently. Samuel acts as an overlord, but power is deeply, deeply localized.
So cutting off the head of the snake doesn't work because you're actually fighting a hydra.
Exactly.
So how do you beat that? I mean, you can't possibly march a Byzantine army to every single mountaintop fortress in the Balkans and endure a 6-month siege for each one. That would take centuries.
It would, which is why Basil decides to use his checkbook just as much as his siege engines.
Okay, now this is interesting.
He pivots to a grueling, systematic war of attrition. Basil understands that Samuel's greatest weakness is his inability to be everywhere at once to reinforce these independent warlords.
Makes sense.
So Basil isolates a fortress and offers the local Bulgarian commander a choice: face a horrific siege or accept a highly lucrative buyout.
He literally just buys their loyalty with Byzantine titles and vast wealth.
Yeah, he offers them the rank of patrikios, which wasn't just some empty honorific. In the Byzantine system, titles came with literal stipends of gold paid directly from the imperial treasury.
Basically, surrender your dusty mountain fort and you can live in luxury in Constantinople.
That's the pitch. But crucially, Basil relocates these defecting commanders. He sends them to govern provinces way out in Armenia or Anatolia or southern Italy.
Oh, that is so smart.
Right. He completely severs them from their local power bases, their loyal troops, and their cultural roots in the Balkans. It ensures they can never organize a rebellion against him.
He's slowly dismantling the infrastructure of the Bulgarian state, one bought-off general at a time.
Exactly. And this grinding war of attrition goes on for decades. Basil launches campaign after campaign, year after year, just slowly tightening the noose.
And it all builds to a devastating climax in the summer of 1014, the Battle of Clydian.
Right. Samuel knows he cannot sustain this war of attrition forever. He has to stop Basil's annual incursions into the Bulgarian heartland.
So he decides to make a stand.
He selects a narrow valley near the Struma River, heavily fortifies the pass at Clydian with these thick wooden walls, and just waits. Basil's army arrives and launches frontal assaults against the barricades, but they are repeatedly repulsed with heavy casualties.
So Samuel's defensive strategy appears to be working.
It does. But Basil has a general named Nikephoros Siphius who finds a geographical loophole.
There's always a hidden path.
There is. Xiphias discovers a steep hidden path that leads up and around the towering Belisica mountain overlooking the pass.
Oh, no.
Yeah. While Basil continues the frontal assault to pin the Bulgarians in place, Xiphias leads a detachment over the mountain and descends right onto the Bulgarian rear.
It's a textbook pincer movement. The Bulgarians are trapped in the valley with nowhere to run.
It turns into a catastrophic rout. And this brings us right back to the infamous event we opened with the blinding of the prisoners.
Right.
Historical chronicles, notably the writings of John Skylitzes, record the event in pretty grim detail. Basil captures the 15,000 men, divides them into hundreds, blinds 99, and leaves one man with one eye to guide them back to Tsar Samuel.
And that's when Samuel dies.
Yeah, Samuel had escaped the battle, but when he sees this horrific procession of his mutilated army stumbling back to his headquarters, he suffers a massive stroke or heart attack and dies just weeks later in October 1014.
Okay, let's pause here and apply some critical thinking to these numbers. Because when you read through the source material, a glaring logistical contradiction really stands out.
Go for it.
The chronicles state that local Bulgarian commanders continued to fight Basil for another 4 years after Clydian.
Yes, they did.
How could a decentralized, exhausted state possibly sustain a war against the Byzantine Empire if they had just lost 15,000 able-bodied men in a single afternoon? I mean, is it possible these numbers were fabricated as Byzantine propaganda to justify Basil's terrifying nickname?
Modern historians overwhelmingly share your skepticism on this. Scholars like Basil Zlatarsky point out that an army of 15,000 was massive for a medieval field engagement anyway, let alone just the number of prisoners taken.
Right, it just doesn't add up.
Some older translations of historical texts, like the 14th century Bulgarian translation of the Manassas Chronicle, suggest the actual number of prisoners was probably closer to 8,000.
Okay, still an absolute atrocity, obviously. But 8,000 makes a lot more sense logistically than 15,000.
It does, but the precise mathematics almost don't matter because the strategic and psychological payload was identical.
The terror factor.
Exactly. And in Byzantine legal tradition, blinding was actually the standard punishment for rebels and traitors.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So by applying this punishment to an entire army, Basil was sending a very chilling legal message. He was saying, I do not view you as a rival sovereign state. I view you as rebellious subjects of Rome.
Wow. That is intense.
It irreparably shattered the morale of the Bulgarian central leadership.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
The resistance limps on, but the writing is on the wall. By 1018, the last vestiges of the Bulgarian state collapse.
The final czar, Ivan Vladislav, is killed in battle at Dyrrhachium.
And his widow negotiates a full and final surrender to Basil. The first Bulgarian Empire officially ceases to exist.
And this is where we really have to examine Basil's strategy for winning the peace, because we saw Simiskis try to erase Bulgarian identity 40 years earlier, and it just sparked a multi-decade insurgency.
Right.
Basil, despite his reputation for unimaginable cruelty on the battlefield, engineers a post-war occupation that is shockingly pragmatic.
He doesn't erase them. He integrates them.
He recognizes that imposing a rigid foreign system on a vast, mountainous, decentralized territory overnight is just a recipe for endless rebellion.
Makes sense.
So he leaves the Bulgarian church effectively independent. He doesn't dissolve it into the Patriarchate of Constantinople. He restructures it as the autocephalous Archbishopric of Ohrid, allowing them to maintain their local ecclesiastical traditions.
That's huge. And he treats the surviving elite as assets
Yeah.
rather than prisoners, right?
Completely. Instead of publicly humiliating the remaining Bulgarian nobility, he absorbs them into the Byzantine aristocracy. He grants them high titles, positions in the imperial administration, and commands in the military.
Keep your enemies closer.
Exactly. He transforms the very people who were fighting him into stakeholders who now actively benefit from the success of the Byzantine state.
But the real masterpiece of his policy is his handling of the economy. Because if you look at the history of occupied territories, taxation is almost always the match that lights the powder keg.
Oh, without fail. Basil acknowledges a fundamental difference between the two economies. The Byzantine Empire was highly monetized. It ran on gold and silver coinage.
Right.
The Bulgarian economy, however, was heavily localized, agrarian, and relied on bartering. It was not monetized at all.
So if Basil had demanded that Bulgarian farmers suddenly pay their taxes in Byzantine gold, it would have just sucked all the wealth out of the region. It would have caused immediate deflation, bankrupted the peasantry, and triggered an uprising almost instantly.
And he avoids that trap completely. Basil issues decrees allowing the Bulgarian population to continue paying their taxes in kind.
Meaning goods and produce.
Exactly. This meant they could pay the Byzantine tax collectors with grain, livestock, and local produce, exactly as they had done under Tsar Samuel.
Wow. So to revise our earlier analogy, it's like executing a hostile takeover of a rival company. But instead of firing the staff and changing all the rules, you let them keep their casual Fridays, their regional managers, and their unique 401k plans.
You just change the logo on the paychecks.
Exactly. Basil realized that true conquest requires dismantling the enemy's military capacity, but carefully preserving their economic and social systems.
He respected the economic reality on the ground, co-opted the leadership, and maintained their religious structures. That is the true paradox of Basil II. He was an uncompromising terror in war, but an incredibly astute statesman in peace.
So if you are looking at this from a modern analytical perspective, the takeaway is clear. Timocles won the battles, but lost the state by insisting on total erasure. Basil II suffered humiliating defeats early on, but he learned how his enemy functioned, dismantled them piece by piece through bribery and attrition, and then realized that to permanently absorb an empire, you really have to meet the conquered people where they are.
And that pragmatism leaves us with a fascinating and honestly, ultimately tragic final thought.
What's that?
Well, the peace that Basil II engineered in 1018 was highly successful and kept the region totally stable for decades. But, Basil eventually died.
Naturally.
And the Byzantine emperors who succeeded him really lacked his nuanced understanding of the Balkans. They looked at the imperial ledgers, saw that Bulgaria was paying taxes in grain, and decided they wanted cold, hard cash.
Oh no. They overturned Basil's policies and demanded taxes be paid in gold.
They did.
They broke the one foundational rule that was holding the entire occupation together.
Yep. That single, greedy, bureaucratic decision devastated the local economy and sparked massive, violent Bulgarian rebellions later in the 11th century.
Unbelievable.
It invites a massive historical what if. I mean, if future emperors had simply maintained Basil's pragmatic tax policy, would the Second Bulgarian Empire have ever risen? Would the entire geopolitical map of the modern Balkans look fundamentally different today?
It is wild to consider. You have a decades-long war, tens of thousands of casualties, emperors humiliated, armies blinded, and the fate of an entire civilization just ultimately hanging on whether a tax bill was paid in wheat or gold. It really proves that military conquest is never just a wrecking ball. It is a terrifyingly complex negotiation. Sometimes it's the paperwork that brings the whole empire down.